بشينو آثيتو لترجمانو عم جابرييلا إنه إشمي نرسل أوراهم ريشونيثو دحو يودا دنيشة Jag hälsar alla välkomna. Jag heter Nursel Aurohom och är ordförande för Assyriska kvinnoförbundet. Vi har med oss idag Gabriele Yonan och Sonja kommer att översätta, inte ordagrant, men i stort vad Gabriele berättar om. Gabriele kommer att prata om, eller på engelska. Seifo, folkmord på assyrier då och nu och 100 år av förföljelser. Den 11 mars 2010 erkände Seifo, Sveriges riksdag, folkmordet Seifo. Dåvarande regering med Carl Bildt i spetsen beklagade sig för Turkiet rörande riksdagsbeslutet. Det ottomanska riket mördade assyrier, armenier och de pontuska grekerna. Min pappa och hans bror överlevde folkmordet Seifo genom att fly till en närliggande by som heter Iwardo, som var högt belägrad. Och tack vare just den byn lyckades några överleva folkmordet. För där mötte turkarna och fanatiska kurder på motstånd. Jag frågade min pappa och min farbror om de såg döda kroppar. Och svaret var hjärtskärande. Far svarade: ja, min dotter, massvis med kroppar, sa han. De fyllde brunnar med blod. Kroppar var som huggna ved staplade på varandra. Massakrar startade i april för 100 år sedan och fortsätter än idag genom ISIS, eller Islamisk stat. För närvarande ser vi hur ISIS kidnappar barn, kvinnor, mördar män. Kvinnor och flickor våldtas, auktioneras till olika priser beroende på åldern. Det finns inte någon reaktion från omvärlden. 40 stycken släktingar till Samira som är med oss här idag har kidnappats. Inget har hört från dem på 3 månader. De vet inte om de lever eller är döda. Vår historia är en del av vår nutid. Till de mörkaste händelserna i assyriernas historia hör folkmordet Seifo. I år, 2015 april, är det 100 år sedan folkmordet Seifo ägde rum. I princip utrotades assyrier och andra kristna minoriteter av det ottomanska riket. I 100 års tid har Turkiet förnekat folkmordet. Därmed också chansen till att påbörja en försoningsprocess hos oss. Vilka spår har folkmordet satt i assyriernas historia? Vilka minnen bär vi dagens assyrier på? 100 år efter Seifo. Vilken koppling finns det mellan det som utspelade sig i dagens Syrien, Irak? Det är också Seifo. Dr. Gabriele Yonan, som är historiker, Mellanösternforskare med inriktning på modern Mellanösternhistoria och författare till flertal böcker om Seifo. Och hon skrev den första boken om Seifo. Ska sätta ljus på frågorna. Hon är expert också på den assyriska moderna historien under hela 1900-talet. Hon kommer att hålla sin föredrag på engelska som sagt. Välkommen Gabriele Yonan.
Hennes första bok tror jag hon skrev redan på 80-talet. Som handlade just om folkmordet Seifo på den assyriska befolkningen. Hon är ju en av världens främsta experter just när det gäller den assyriska moderna historien under 1900-talet. Det finns en massa skrivet om den alltså gamla historien om Assyrien, men väldigt lite egentligen om den moderna historien. Så därför var det väldigt nytt när hon skrev. Så hon har åkt världen runt och hållit föreläsningar just som gäller de assyriska historien under 1900-talet. Jag vet inte hur många böcker hon har skrivit, men hon kan också skriva och läsa assyriska. Hon talar flytande persiska. För det började med studier i språket, Mellanösternspråken. Så att hon kunde i princip lära sig läsa och skriva när hon träffade Yonan, som är en östassyrier och bosatt också i Tyskland. Och på det sättet har intresset för våran historia ökat hos henne. Så att jag ska inte vara långrandig här. Och varsågod.
Thank you.
Gabriele.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sonja. First of all, I am very grateful for the invitation by the Women's Union, by the Kvinnoförbundet, and that you arranged, that you organized a seminar about Saipho, which is also a part of the 100 years memorial with so many different informations and events. A seminar is not a thing which is a big auditorium, so the auditorium is very good. Then later we will have the opportunity that you ask me questions, and then I can also answer all the questions. If there were several hundreds, that would not be possible. I made an arrangement with Sonja that later, when I give my speech, my paper, from time to time, she will also make a free translation, so that those people who are not able to follow in English, they will also have an opportunity to understand. Sonja asked me, before I am starting with my paper about Saipho, to give some informations how I became interested in the modern Assyrian history. Some people have an idea, and many know maybe my books, but all they know, I am German. How did it come? I mean, there are several Germans or Swedish, they are married with an Assyrian, but it doesn't mean that they write books about the people where the husband is coming from. Indeed, it was not the husband who was giving me the first motivation. In 1968, that means now 47 years ago, I became a refugee. I went from East Germany, it was the Cold War, so I left East Germany and I could make it from Bulgaria to Turkey. In East Germany, I was starting with studying Iranian literature and history and language. So my aim was not directly to go back from Turkey to Germany, west, but to go to Iran, to Persia. And I could arrange my papers, and then I followed my way to Tehran. After a while staying there and having some relations to the embassy, so I met my first Assyrian friends. And they were so kind people. I didn't know in that time Assyrians are existing. I spoke Persian, and I met a person who looked not like Persian. I was even scared a little bit. Mushe Murad, by the way. So he invited me to his family, but I didn't accept because I was afraid. And then he came with his daughter and wife, so that I have confidence. This was my first time when I got in contact with Assyrians, and I learned they speak a different language and they are Christians. This was all what I know, and they were very kind and very caring for me. I was staying in their house for some weeks or so in Khiabane Shirazi, but you may know it. My friend Daniel Crispy is from Tehran. Yeah, in the neighborhood. So then a year went, and I came home to West Berlin. And I continued my studies. And as a student, there is a Mensa. You go every day as a student in the Mensa. And when I was sitting with my friends, behind me, I heard somebody speaking Assyrian. I did not understand what, but I knew this is Madin Khaye, Assyrian. That was Shlimon Yonan. So that was how I met him, and I turned to him and I said, "Oh, you are Assyrian." So we started our relationship. But it was not the most important thing. In Berlin, there was an institute for Semitic and Arabic studies. And the director was Rudolf Matsuch, who was not a German but a Czech, who had lived for 13 years in Tehran. His wife was Persian, and he has very strong relation to the Assyrian community. He spoke fluently, and he was the only professor to teach modern Assyrian in the university. There is even until today modern Assyrian, not the dialect, but the written modern language. So he was my second pillar beside Shlimon Yonan as a husband, and so I learned the language. And first my interest was only the language. We went to Chabur with Shlimon and we took tapes with dialects. Now I am very happy, and I will put them in the internet, because Chabur now is empty of Assyrians. Language, everything is empty. But in that time, 45 years ago, Chabur was 40 villages of Assyrians. So I learned the language there, and I was just interested first in the language.
Shall I? Kortfattat. Hon vill tacka Assyriska kvinnoförbundet för inbjudan. Och eftersom det här är en seminarieform så vill ju hon gärna få en interaktivitet med er. Att vi kommer få möjlighet att ställa frågor. Och när de undrar över något så är det bara att ställa dem. Och sen inleder hon med att eftersom jag ställt frågan om hur vaknade intresset hos henne för den assyriska frågan. Och då berättar hon att hon bodde i Östtyskland och där flydde hon 1968 eftersom det var en kommunistisk stat och så flydde hon till först Bulgarien och sen Turkiet. Hon var bara 22 år och hamnade då till slut i Teheran där hon studerade persiska. Och hon kom i kontakt också med många, hade kontakter, men kom också i kontakt med några assyrier. Och där förstod hon att assyrierna var ett eget folk, hade ett eget språk, de var kristna, att det var annorlunda än de perser, iranier som hon hade omkring sig. Så det var en ny kunskap för henne. Hon bodde i Iran ett tag och sen kom hon tillbaka till Tyskland för att fortsätta sina studier. Och på universitetet där hon studerade så hörde hon bakom sig någon som pratade assyriska och hon kände igen språket. Och det var hennes blivande man, Shlimon Yonan, som hade pratat, så att hon blev väldigt glad av att få den kontakten. Och sen kom hon att träffa på den här professorn, den enda som då i alla fall kände till och kunde behärskade den moderna assyriskan, kunde skriva och läsa. Så att det var hans det han forskade på. Så att därifrån började också hennes intresse, eftersom hon fick den här professorn till som hon kunde fortsätta sina studier.
Yeah. So, the next 2 years after my visit in Chabur, I wrote down the Assyrian text by help of Shlimon Yonan. I translated it by help of Rudolf Matsuch. And then, 1975, I was thinking to write an introduction, just an introduction about the dialects of Chabur. And when I was working on the introduction, I found there is nothing. I mean, if you introduce something, it means the other people know the whole context. I found out there was no context. There was never written a book about modern Assyrian culture, national movement, history, languages. So my first book, I in the meaning to write an introduction, I took 3 more years, and this was my first book, Assyrians Today, and the subtitle, their culture, history, language, national movement, and Exodus and what was the, because it's in German, Exodus, extinction, and persecution. That was the subtitle, and the subtitle is so long because nobody in Germany ever heard about modern Assyrians. So that was my first book. Still, in this time, I was not aware about Saipho, about genocide. Interestingly, since I was together with Shlimon Yonan, we married in 1971. Since 1970, Shlimon Yonan is an activist, an Assyrian activist, very close to policy. So without him, I would not have understood these activities of the modern Assyrians in the world. In this time, just short before we met each other, the first international organization was founded, and this was the Assyrian Universal Alliance, and one of the founding members is here. This is Daniel Crispy. He was one of the founding members. The first founding year, 1968, it was before my involvement. There was a meeting in Pau in France with all the founding members. And there they decided that there should be 1 day of commemoration of the massacre of Semile. Semile was made a massacre. It was a massacre, but later I found that this massacre of 1933, which was made first time, that was the first year of independence of Iraq, and the army and the government of Iraq did this. The real special thing, in contrary to the big Saipho, was that it became an international issue. Semile was becoming an international issue, worldwide known, because of the League of Nations has to take it over. Patriarch and many activists from all over the world came. This was a big difference to the Saipho. We are not yet in the situation as it became, like Semile became so important. But Semile was only a local limited massacre. Even if we say, let's say 3,000, it was maybe not 3,000 deaths, but with all the consequences. And the consequences was that 20,000 left then Iraq, going to Chabur, Syria. This is the reason why the people came to Syria. So the problem why for me in that time, Semile massacre, but it was not called a genocide. And even for me, it was not clear that Semile was a part of the big genocide. When we look at the genocide history of Assyrians, it is not just 1914 to 18. It was Semile then continue, and we can say even today we are in the continuing the genocide. What happened to Khabur is again a part of genocide. So Semile was decided to be, that was because it started on the 7th of August. So this became for decades the day of commemorating a genocide, a massacre, but in a way like it was a genocide. Now, yeah, sorry.
Hon åkte tillbaka till Khabur med hennes blivande man som var Gabriele Yonan. Och hennes syfte var att skriva en bok om de olika dialekterna i Khabur. Och det är ett område i Syrien, ett flodområde i Syrien. Men hon insåg att det var så lite kunskap om historien, om folkets bakgrund. Så därför blev det en mer omfattande bok än vad hon först hade tänkt. Så att det blev hennes första bok som heter Assyrians Today. Kom att heta. Och sen blev hon mer och mer medveten om inte bara den historiska utan också den politiska kampen som folket driver och drev. Och hennes man då var väldigt engagerad aktivist i den assyriska rörelsen. Och 1968 så hade man en konferens där många viktiga beslut togs som grund för den assyriska rörelsen. Bland annat så bildades Assyrian Universal Alliance som är AUA. Och en av de grundarna sitter här med oss, Daniel Crispy. Jätteroligt. Och man tog många sådana här viktiga beslut som att ha en viss minnesdag till massakrerna. Och den första som de var Semile-massakern i Irak. Som låg närmast i tiden och det var så uppenbart att staten Irak låg bakom och det fanns mycket kunskap om vad som hade hänt. Det var till skillnad från man kände inte till så mycket kanske om Seifo. Det var stora skillnader i alla fall i händelseförloppet. Så därför och hon nämner också att det var ju många som flydde. De som bor i Khabur är ju flyktingar från händelserna i Semile. Så att runt 20 000 flyktingar flydde från Irak ner till området. Men fortfarande kallades inte det som hände i Semile för ett folkmord utan en massaker. Jag tror det var så.
The book Assyrians Today came out 1978 in the end. And this was just the time. Sometimes things are coming in the right time and sometimes you have to wait that there is a reception. When Assyria was ready, there was a human rights society of the endangered people, and they approached me and said, we heard that there is a manuscript. We are in need to have a manuscript about to print a book about Assyrians because the churches and the court cases need material. There are so many asylum seekers. And they say they are not Turks and not Arabs, but and they are refusing to to speak with Turkish translators. So please let us the book printed in our pogrom edition, so we can distribute 10,000 of. Normally a book which is in this way, you printed 500 exemplars and it is very expensive and nobody can buy it. So by chance the book was taken from my hand and it was printed and it was useful. So that was the first thing. Then I don't know, I started another book which was about the history of journals of Assyrians, which has nothing to do with the it's not true. It has to do, it is a history of the journals of Assyrians. So I was wondering, how is it possible? And my professor wrote a little foreword, and he wrote for this book, there is no one people in the world which is so small, which is so distributed in the world, in which has printed so many newspapers in the history of 150 years. Why was it like this? Because of many times in the 20th century, when Assyrians was settled, like in Urmia or so, then there came the First War. They had to pack and to flee. The first thing in Bakuba, for example, in the where the 50,000 Assyrians were refugees, they collected money to buy a printing press. This is not the normal way other people would do it. So it is very interesting. Schools for the Assyrians in general, doesn't matter which group it is, the language, the literature, the printing, this is their history. And I have to stress this because later when I speak about the difference about the genocide, what means the genocide for the Armenians and and Jews, and what means the genocide for the Assyrians. There is a different interpretation and meaning what it means for them, for their identity. Not the same like in Assyrian and like in Armenian and Jewish case, but this will come later. So indirectly, the history of journals, because if you have to print books, you need better foundation. But journals were easy to, much more easy. And again, we among us is one, Daniel Crispy, who was also one of the many redactors who published newspapers. And I mean, Sweden now we know that how many newspapers in the diaspora came out. So it has to do with persecution and even with genocide, that the Assyrian are a people, as my professor said, they're so small and have published so much, more than any people. In this time, in the 80s, when I worked on this book, there happened something which led that I wrote the genocide book. Maybe the older among you remember that in the beginning of the 80s, there was an Armenian organization called Asala, and they made a lot of terroristic actions against the Turkish embassies. 35 embassies were bombed and a lot of things. And this Armenian group, it was a political, extremist group, we can say. They wanted, with these actions, that the Turks are accepting that Armenians were victims of genocides. Later, this gives me an input. I was not really, I read in the newspapers, and I had Armenian friends in my institute, so we discussed it. But I remember, as more as I read about Armenian genocide, that I became clear that the Assyrian also were victims. Until then, I was not thinking, though I wrote in my first book about the history, but it was not clear to me that they also were victims of the big genocide. And there is now one, and then you can translate, there is one very interesting thing. Schliemann and Schliemann Yonan and his friends in Sweden and in Netherlands, and so very activistic people help get it. It was then the problems between church and national movement, all this. So one day in the evening I said to Schliemann, are you aware that the Assyrians are victims of the genocide like the Armenians? And he answered, and I think he answered like many activists in that time would have answered. He said, so what? It's not interesting for you. We are looking now to our future. We have problems in our present times. We are not interested to look back. That was his answer. I mean, it was not like a pope, so he was not impressed. He didn't say, "Oh, great, make something" or so. He was just involved in this actual things. The people were your fathers and mothers who could not read and write. They need help, translation. They need to survive in Europe, and not so much interested in this. So I started the book more or less writing it for myself. I didn't have the feeling I do something which will be important for in my life time that the living generation will be interested. It was just a scholarly work. I did not work in the way like I wrote Assyrians Today.
Den här första boken hon skrev, Assyrians Today, kom precis i rätt tid. Det fanns behov av mycket kunskap om assyriernas bakgrund och så. Det började komma flyktingar från Mellanöstern som Europa inte riktigt kände till. De visste inte vilket språk de pratade, vilken religion de tillhörde. Så att det fanns väldigt stort behov av kunskap kring den assyriska gruppen. Så därför var det flera som kontaktade henne och ville trycka den här boken, så att hon förstod att det fanns mycket intresse kring den här gruppen. Den andra boken handlade om alltså assyriernas tryck och bokhistoria, journalismus, och hon skrev mycket om det som utgavs av assyrierna, alltså olika tidningar, tidskrifter, böcker och deras historia. Och eftersom det var så påtagligt, det fanns ju när det är någonting som är skrivet, när det är någonting som är tryckt, så finns det kvar. Det finns en historia kring det, så därför skrev hon den boken om det. Sen kom ju i början på 90-talet så var det ju armenierna, särskilt en extremistgrupp som begick olika dåd för att få ett erkännande av folkmordet på armenier. Och hon kopplar ju det att hon hade ju kunskapen om att även andra minoriteter fanns och hade fallit offer för de massakrerna. Därför började hon prata om det med sin omgivning, och bland annat med sin man då, Schleiman, och han var inte riktigt intresserad. Det var ungefär första gången hon nämnde det. Vet du, sa hon, att ert folk har ju också drabbats av en seifo. Men det här hör ju till historien. Nu ska vi se framåt. Utan det viktigaste är vilka rättigheter vi får framåt i tiden. Det var lite det svaret hon fick. Men hon fortsatte i alla fall att intressera sig och forska kring seifo och vad som hände.
Before I just give a picture about Saifo and then come to special points. The book came out at 1989, and there was reception is very interesting. Sometimes a historian, any historian, when he writes a book, mostly it will not be in his lifetime that there will be a resonance, a reception, a broader within the scholarly or within the other community. So this book found some reviews, of course, from my colleagues, but not any resonance from the Assyrians. The publishers, I made it again in a human rights publication, so that it could be in a broader, more the edition was bigger. But interestingly, it took 10 years until the new generation of Assyrians, the generation who grew up in Europe, and especially, and I must say, this is all written in German. So, of course, it is difficult to expect a reception from countries who are not able to read it. For example, the Americans, it took them 20 years to learn, oh, there's a woman, she wrote a book about this, because it is in German. Now there are several translations, but it was 10 years, there was silence. There was no any interest. And in the end of the 90s, special groups in Belgium, it was interestingly a left group from the Western Assyrians. Maybe some of them know them under the old name Doronoye. They were the first who made conferences, and they had, in that time, they worked with the Kurdish PKK, and they invited me several times to Brussels to give interviews. This was the first. But then, and sometimes it is important, then there must happen something that then an attention comes to an issue, and it happens something. In the year 2000, again the Armenians, Asala was over, nothing happened, but then the Armenians, they have a great potential of intellectuals, a great potential of money, and a strong lobby of about 1 million in America and 750,000 in France. That means they all the time worked lobbying on the recognition of the Armenian genocide. They tried it in that time. Administrative was Clinton as an American president in the year 2000 in autumn. And it was close before that American administration and the president would recognize Armenian genocide, like before yesterday our German president was accepting it. So they were close before. And the Turks were in the highest point of nervosity. In this time, the foreign minister was Gül, maybe somebody reminds. And Gül was threatening America and said, if you do this, I cancel my visit. I don't come to America. Very strong. So the journalist tried in Istanbul to find some Armenian to give statements. And that would have been the last statement of an Armenian in Istanbul. So nobody, Armenians are smart people, so nobody gave any statement within Turkey. But 2 journalists found out far away, there is a city, Diyarbakir. There are also Christians. Let's go and try, maybe we found somebody to give statement. And by chance, they came to a church of the Syrian Orthodox, the Matmariam church, and there was a priest very far from any political things, just a harmless priest who speaks Khobonoyo and who has a flock only from 60 people, very small. And these 2 journalists, because I asked him, how did it come that you give? I said, I didn't give an interview. 2 people came to my church and asked, we want to see the church. Oh, please come in, 1 cup of tea. They sit there and they said to him, by the way, did you hear Armenian America? I said, and the priest answered, Armenian recognition. Yeah, I heard so, but and then just by a cup of tea, he said, but it was not Armenian only. My people, Suryani, all we were in Istanbul 160,000, and look, nobody more there. That was all what he said, not in the meaning giving a statement for journalists. Next morning, in in Istanbul, Hürriyet, in the first front page, a traitor among us, not only Armenians in a quotation, but also Suryaniler, Assyria, so they are also victims. Immediately he was arrested. Immediately he should have been even today in the prison, but because of diaspora, it was not even, internet was existing, but immediately, like a fire in all Europe, the diaspora and group, they informed each other, informed the parliaments in Netherlands, Sweden, Germany, everywhere. And this was a start to bring the issue of Assyrian genocide international known. This was the beginning, and then the book became a tool for help. I mean, not immediately, but then there was what I didn't know. It was a Turkish translation, by the way. Yes, it was 1999. Yeah, I don't speak about the Swedish it was the same, but it was published in Turkey, and I didn't know this. And when I came there as one of the delegation, one of the Assyrians who came with me, he spoke about my book, but the book here is green, and I didn't have my glasses. So I said, no, this is not my book. My book is green. This was brown. I said, this is your book. I said, and I was in Istanbul, and I wanted to go to Diyarbakir. And he said, where did you get this? So like this. I said, oh, I bought it in the bookshop. In the bookshop? How is it possible? So I learned that you could buy this book, you could buy Akşam Taner book. I didn't even dare to go. I asked Erol Dora, was with me, and I said, Erol, can you buy me this book? But you do it. I don't go there. Maybe they will arrest me when I ask for a book of Holocaust. You can buy every book. So we bought one, and yes, you have seen the pictures. I gave it then myself to the Attorney General of the military court. And I asked him why this book is published here, and a priest who speaks one sentence about genocide will be arrested and has to go to the military court. And he said, yes, is so. So this was the beginning, and now you can translate. This was the beginning that genocide became an issue.
1989 kom den här boken, men responsen på den var inte särskilt stor, särskilt inte bland assyrierna. Så att det tog ungefär 10 år, berättar hon, tills någon eller intresset växte. Och eftersom dels var den ju på tyska, hennes första, så att det var inte så många som kunde tyska. Men så fanns det då en grupp unga som växte upp i Europa som började intressera sig för den här frågan. Och ordnade en konferens, det Douronoye som de kallas, och ordnade en konferens om Seifo. Och det här var i början på 2000-talet, och hon berättar redan året innan så hade den här boken översatts till turkiska och hade kopierats och spridits där. Så att uppmärksamheten ökade för den frågan. Bland annat var det också en rörelse bland armenier som nu hade mer status där de befinner sig, till exempel i USA. De hade pengar och de hade inflytande på olika sätt som de kunde använda för att få till ett erkännande eller påbörja en sån process i USA. Och när turkiska premiärministern Gül fick kännedom om det, så började han hota USA med att bryta alla kontakter med dem om USA skulle ta ett sådant beslut. Och det var så att inga armenier i Turkiet vågade kommentera händelserna i USA. Men det var 2 journalister som besökte en syrisk-ortodox kyrka i Istanbul, i Diyarbakır var det, förlåt, där den här prästen Akbulut, Yusuf Akbulut är präst. Och de besökte kyrkan och frågade då vid tillfället, vad tycker du om USAs erkännande här av Seifo på armenierna? Och då sa han, ja men det är inte bara armenierna som har drabbats, utan även vårat folk har drabbats. Det var i princip en mening han sa. Och nästa dag så blev det en rubrik i tidningen, den turkiska tidningen Hürriyet, som är en stor tidning i Turkiet. Då rubriken på den artikeln var "En förrädare bland oss". Och därefter blev han ju fängslad för den meningen som han sa. Och det blev en lång process där tills han släpptes. I flera år så tror jag han satt.
Yeah, so it was necessary to explain you the way how it comes that this became a very interesting part of the modern history of Assyrians. In their consciousness, it is always there, and it was always in your collective memory, because your grandparents and grandparents has traditioned these events, but it was never discussed as a political issue. So now from 2000, from the case of Akbulut until 2015, these are only 15 years. And in this 15 years, the Assyrians of all different churches in all different political groups has organized conferences, demonstrations, written new books. Since this book was there is now many more material. Even I have a second volume with documents which is still not yet published, but now it is no more something which is unknown. Of course, it doesn't mean that the whole world was, at least until recently, has known it. But the Assyrians had only 15 years, while the Armenians, with their much stronger potential, had 80 years to work on the genocide. There is a lot of reasons. First, that Armenians have a quite different history. They have a lot of more intellectuals and historians. For Assyrians, still today there are rare cases that they study sociology or politology. Until recently, there were only medical doctors, engineers, architects, Mohandes, doctor, and this were the three. And if one says, I am studying artist or music or so, then this was something has no any value. So it is also a reason that Armenians have their own historians. They don't need German or a French. Most of the books about genocide are written by Armenians. It is very similar that the most books of the Holocaust, Jewish Holocaust, are written by Jewish. So, but the Assyrians hadn't had this competence until recently. It is only now that you could do this. Now, the word Saifo. I mean, my team is Saifo 1915, Year of the Swerve, Assyrian Genocide. This is, by the way, also a very fantastic documentary film, which you will soon see, made by Aziz, produced in Sweden, with the money of Sweden. And I had the chance in Berlin, there was a smaller group of 50 or 100 people, that we could see this movie in advance, but not officially. Officially, the premiere will be here. And this is maybe the first real documentary film about the genocide as it should have been made. It is a professional film. The facts of the genocide are now very well known to most people of you. So, I mean, we know now, everybody also know that the genocide of the Assyrian was a part of the World War #1. When we speak about year of the Sword 1915, then this doesn't mean that the cypher was just 1 year. But we can say it was the highest point. It started even before the First War started, even in autumn, before Turkey joined the war. It started in certain parts, and it was about 1918, and after it starts again. Therefore, many Assyrians then in the 20s left for Syria. So this is the historical frame. The geography also, you know that it was not just in Tur Abdin or so, but it was in the triangle about in what we can say in Upper Mesopotamia, western as far as like Urfa and Diyarbakir, all were Syriac Christianity, like Chaldeans, Syriac Orthodox, Nestorians in the Hekkari, and even in northwestern Persia. And one of the most important source, which is also one of the most important source for the Armenians, is a book with a title which includes every the geographical. It is the Arnold Toynbee papers, which later Arnold Toynbee became a worldwide known historian. But he was young one time and he was not so well known. He was the assistant of an old English politician, James Bryce. So the papers he collected in 1915-16 became known under the name of James Bryce. And the title was also changed. The original title is Papers and Documents on the Treatment of Armenians and Assyrian Christians by the Turks, 1915-16, in the Ottoman Empire and northwestern Persian. The Armenians have the tendency, not all, but we can speak in generally, to claim that the uniqueness, that there was a first genocide made on the Armenians, no any other. The problem is they used the same sources. This book is one of the important. Then missionary Lepsius, which I also used, is full. Always it is written about Armenians. The title speaks about Armenians, but inside every second sentence is saying, and the Syrian Christians has the same fate. That means that the Armenians have the tendency in the last 80 years to manipulate the history. I say this and I speak about this in my book in the introduction. When you today ask a Turk, do you know, what do you think about genocide? He will, if he is 20 years or 30 years, and I never heard about this. This is not existing. He didn't learn it. And if he is a scholar, and you say, okay, then go you to archives. He cannot go to the archives. It is open, but it is written in Arabic writing, and it is Osman Turkish. So even if you are interested as a scholar to learn, you should then be an Osmanist, because now Turks have a Latin alphabet since 1928. If you change your alphabet, which you do now for yourself, in Latin. That means after 3 generations, nobody of you can read the Sobonoye books. You should keep this in mind. So, but if you ask an Armenian, he cannot say, I didn't know about Assyrian genocide. He know it because when he knows his sources, he must know that it is. So, it is also not good to not to be interested. But a Turk today, the generation, 2nd, 3rd generation, they really didn't learn it in school. So we cannot speak about that they manipulated. Now they know because it became a political issue. But from the historian point of view, Armenian knew 80 years that the Assyrians were a part of the genocide and that it was not an Armenian genocide. It was a Christian genocide. And this is my theory. And when I was in Diyarbakir 2000, the Attorney General ask all the people what they are doing. And when I said I am a historian, he said, oh, this is interesting. Please answer me the question. Was there an Armenian genocide? And then all the 60 parliamentarians, they were afraid, what is she now saying? And I said, no, there was not an Armenian genocide. Oh, there was a Christian genocide. You yourself spoke about this attorney explained us that Anatolian was a mosaic of Assyrians, Greek, Armenians. And now there is nobody there. It was not only an Armenian genocide. It is a manipulation to speak only about Armenian genocide. It was a Christian genocide, which didn't make it better for the politician. But that was my answer. And so this is the explanation what sources is in that book. Mostly the same sources with some more sources which I found in the German archives, which the Armenian also use. We have the same sources. And the demography, as I said, it was more or less a compact. It was not the same like Armenians. Armenians were West and East Armenians. But the Assyrian population, they lived until 1915 compact in one relatively smaller area. Western until Tur Abdin and like Diyarbakir, Ofra, the cities, which are no more than Aramaic-speaking population. They spoke all Turkish, but they were Syriac Christianity. And then the most eastern was the Ormia area. And all this was involved in the genocide. They were all so. And when we speak about statistics, why Assyrians and also Armenians know so good about their statistics, because from long time ago every priest has to give the figures to the bishop of his diocese and the bishop to the patriarch. So when your patriarch and the patriarch of the Nestorians and Chaldeans, they could give exactly figures, numbers, how many priests died, how many churches were destroyed, how many people were in each village. So these statistics are also in the book because I could find it easily. It was always there. There is no possibility to say, where do you have this statistics? They are clearly written, especially for the Catholics, in the annual, every year they have for the whole Catholic world. And when we compare 1913-14 annuary of the Catholic, Chaldean and Syria Catholic, and then 4 years later, then we know exactly how many is missing. So the statistics are
översätta det sista här. Hon berättar om vilket område det handlar om, det här som pågick och också om den dokumentation som finns kring händelseförloppet kring Seifo. Hon menar på att turkarna har inte fått undervisat eller lärt sig sin historia. När du frågar en turk så vet han inte liksom, nej det här har inte ägt rum. Och när man går till deras arkiv så är det mycket riktigt så att det är många som inte kan läsa de dokument som finns där. Eftersom de var skrivna på ottomanska, det gamla språket, med bokstäver, arabiska bokstäver. Vilket gör att de turkar som lever idag har inte möjlighet att läsa dem. Det är väldigt fåtal i världen som behärskar det här. Men det hon också säger att de flesta dokumenten som finns nämner armenier och andra kristna minoriteter, för att det här var ett folkmord på kristna minoriteter. Och där gjorde man ingen urskillnad vilka som var armenier och vilka som var de andra. Så att det var tydligt att det var mot alla kristna i området. Och hon säger också att den statistik som finns är väldigt säkrad. Att vi vet hur många som omkom, för att varje kyrka, varje präst hade som bra koll på sina medlemmar, vilka familjer som var medlemmar, och de var tvungna att rapportera det här till patriarkatet regelbundet. Så därför hade de bra koll på hur många som fanns införe Seifo och hur många som blev kvar efter.